It is early March, and in the little Mercian town that I call home, the first signs of spring are beginning to show. The days are lengthening, and warm is gently creeping back into the earth. Around the ponds where my grandfather first took me birdwatching as a child, frogs and toads will soon begin to spawn. In their burrows, the kingfishers will lay their first clutches, while soon hawthorn and nettles, dandelions and wild garlic will push through the soil in the woods near my house. Bluebells will once again carpet the Warwickshire woodlands where I played as a child. Had I been living in the time of my anglo-saxon ancestors, this season would be marked with offerings. To Thraitha, the goddess of victory, for the returning sun that vanquishes the long winter's cold. To the Alphas, so the seeds that we sow might yield a bountiful harvest. To the Kofgodas, the spirits of home, that the plough might not break and the spring rains would pass without misfortune. But we do not live in that time. We live in an age where many have become disconnected from the rhythms of the land. Few of us grow our own food, we rely on supermarkets, where the changing of the seasons is barely noticed. More of us than ever live in towns and cities where green spaces are often scarce, fragmented or poorly tended, while precious few spend time in the wild places, and all too often nature is seen not as something alive, but as a commodity, something to be managed, exploited, or merely observed from a distance. Yet modern research is beginning to affirm something our ancestors instinctively knew. That to be in nature is to be healthier in body and mind. Studies have revealed the intricate networks of the natural world, how trees share resources through their roots, how forests respond collectively to threats. In many ways, science is only now catching up to what animists have always believed. The world is not an empty stage upon which humans play out their lives, but a living, breathing, interconnected web of being. A world with thought, memory, and, at least in my view, spirit. And that, my friends, is the subject of today's video. Animism is one of the oldest and most fundamental ways of seeing the world. At its core, it is the belief that the world is alive, not just with gods or great spirits, but with countless unseen presences that exist within nature itself. Rocks, rivers, trees, and even the wind are not mere objects, but beings with their own existence, agency, and meaning. The term animism comes from the Latin anima, meaning soul or spirit, and it was first coined in the 19th century by the anthropologist Edward Tylor. He described it as the belief that all things, living and non-living, possess a spirit or consciousness. But to our pre-Christian ancestors, animism wasn't just a belief system, it was reality. It was the way they understood their relationship with the world around them. In early Germanic and Norse traditions, this perspective shaped daily life. The land was not seen as a passive backdrop for human activity, it was full of presence. In Anglo-Saxon England, people acknowledged the Landvættir, the spirits of the land, and left offering to them for safe passage or good fortune. The Elfas or elves were once not seen as fancy creatures, but as powerful, capricious spirits who could bring both blessings and misfortune. And even within the home, the Kofgodas or the household gods were honoured to ensure prosperity and protection. For an animist, the world is a web of relationships. Everything is interconnected. When you walk through a forest, you are not simply passing through lifeless objects, you are moving among spirits, each with their own essence. The stone by the river has witnessed centuries. The wind carries messages, and the land itself remembers. But in the modern world, this way of seeing has been largely forgotten. Science and industry have given us extraordinary advancements, but they've also reshaped our understanding of nature. We've been taught to see it as separate from us, something to be controlled, owned, or exploited. And yet, paradoxically, modern research is beginning to validate what animists have always known. That nature is not just a collection of resources, but a vast, interconnected system, alive in ways that we are only just beginning to understand. So what does that mean for us today? How can we reconnect with this way of seeing the world, and why does it matter? Well, in my time working in the environmental sector, I've become increasingly aware of the challenges that people face when it comes to accessing nature. Many of us are more disconnected from the land than ever before. Urbanisation, technology, and modern lifestyles have created a world where green spaces are often out of reach, and where nature is seen as something separate from daily life rather than an integral part of it. Today, more than half of the world's population lives in cities, and that number is only growing. Though recent years have seen some improvements, many of these urban spaces are designed with little regard for our need to connect with the natural world. Parks are often scarce, fragmented, or poorly maintained, and for many, the nearest green space is simply too far away to visit regularly. And this disconnection isn't just about convenience, it has serious consequences for our well-being. Studies have shown that a lack of access to nature correlates with increased stress, anxiety, and depression, while conversely, time spent in green spaces has been linked to improved mental and physical health. There's a major study done by the University of East Anglia that found that exposure to green spaces reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, premature death, stress, and high blood pressure. Research from the Mayo Clinic suggests that spending time in natural environments can significantly improve mood, reduce anxiety, and enhance one's cognitive function. Researchers have analysed data on more than 2 million people in Wales over the period of 10 years to explore the impact of green spaces on mental health. They linked information about people's mental health with information about the greenness of their home's immediate surroundings and how close they live to green or blue spaces, such as parks, lakes, and beaches. They found that people generally had a lower risk of anxiety and depression if they lived closer to these natural spaces. Now, these findings reinforce something that many of us working in the environmental field have long thought but didn't have the research to prove: that nature isn't just nice to have, it is essential for human health and well-being. Yet despite this, many people struggle to integrate nature into their daily lives. One study in the UK found that urban residents often feel disconnected with nature, with 20% unable to recall the last time they saw a farm animal. In many cities, people have to travel miles just to find a decent green space. But even in built-up environments, there are ways to reconnect. Community gardens, green rooftops, and even simple acts like growing plants at home can help to bridge that gap. Research also shows that engaging in green exercise, physical activity within natural settings, can significantly boost mental well-being, reduce stress, and improve overall quality of life. Now, by recognising this disconnection and actively working to restore our relationship with nature, we don't just honour the wisdom of our ancestors, we also build healthier, more fulfilling lives for ourselves. Our ancestors viewed nature as a living, breathing entity, filled with spirits and energies that influence their daily lives. Today, while many may have lost this animistic perspective, modern science is uncovering profound connections between our well-being and the natural world. As I've said, research has shown that spending time in natural environments does offer a multitude of health benefits, both mental and physical. And these scientific findings echo the wisdom of animistic traditions, which have long recognised the profound bond between humans and nature. By acknowledging and nurturing this connection, we can foster a healthier, more harmonious existence. For our ancestors, nature wasn't something separate. It was woven into their daily lives. They made offerings to the land spirits, sought wisdom in the turning of the seasons, and understood that their survival depended on maintaining a relationship with the world around them. Today, most of us don't live as they did, but that doesn't mean that we can't rekindle that connection. One of the biggest challenges in the modern world is that so many of us have been conditioned to see nature as just a backdrop, something that we visit rather than something that we live within. But animism teaches that we are never separate from it. So how do we bring that awareness into our daily lives? The first step is simple: awareness. Animism is about relationship. When you step outside, take a moment to acknowledge what is around you. The old tree at the end of your street isn't just a piece of wood, it has witnessed the lives of generations. The river that runs through your town has its own history, its own presence. Even in cities, nature can persist between the cracks in the pavement, in the birds that nest upon the rooftops, in the very air that we breathe. And by acknowledging these presents, even just in your mind, your perspective starts to shift. It turns the world from something lifeless into something that's alive. Now, in many animistic traditions, relationship is built through reciprocity. If you take, you give. If you enter a place, you acknowledge it. Simple offerings, whether it's a drop of water, a whispered word of thanks, or a small token left at a special tree, these are all ways of forming a connection with the natural world. Our ancestors did this for thousands of years. It doesn't need to be particularly elaborate, it just needs to be an act of respect. The land doesn't demand a great deal, only to be acknowledged. It's why we made offerings in bogs. It's why we had sacred groves for thousands of years. Most of us walk through the world without really seeing it. But if you walk with intention, paying attention to the signs of life around you, you begin to notice things that you never did before. The smell of earth after rain, the way that trees lean towards the sun, the hush that falls over the land just before a storm. Now, some animistic traditions speak of places being awake. Some trees, rivers, hills have a stronger presence than others. If you pay attention, you may just start to feel it. Another way to practice animism in your daily life is by tending to a space with reverence. This doesn't have to mean building an altar in your home, although I would recommend that you do. It could be as simple as caring for a particular tree, visiting a particular part of the woods regularly, or just carving out a place in your garden as sacred. When we treat a space as sacred, it becomes so. It's the act of tending something with care that changes not only how we see it, but how we feel within it. I would also say that engaging through nature through craft and creation is a fantastic way of developing these relationships. In the past, every craft was a relationship with nature. The woodworker understood the tree that they carved it from. The weaver knew the plants that made the dyes. Today, much of what we consume is mass-produced, but if you take the time to work with natural materials, whether it's whittling, gardening, or even cooking, it fosters a deeper connection with the world around you. So I would say approach natural materials with reverence. If you cut a branch down, acknowledge the tree. If you use a stone for something, understand where it came from. These small acts of awareness turn everyday actions into something much more meaningful. Animism isn't about making everything into a complex ritual or memorizing ancient beliefs. It's about shifting how we see the world. It is a total mindset shift. It's about moving through life with awareness, with respect, with gratitude. The world has never stopped speaking, it's just that many of us have stopped listening. The spirits are still here, the land still remembers, and if you listen, you might just hear them too. For thousands of years, our ancestors lived in a world that was alive. They honoured the land, the rivers, the trees, not because it was quaint folklore, but because they understood that their lives depended on maintaining a relationship with the world around them. Now, today, many of us have lost that same sense of connection. We live in a time where nature is something separate from us, something to be visited or consumed rather than something that we are part of. But science is now proving what animists have always known, that reconnecting with nature isn't just about spirituality, it's about survival, it's about health, it's about well-being, it's about remembering who we are. And the best part is you don't even have to live in the wilderness, renounce modern life, or follow some obscure ancient path to do it. Reconnection just starts with the simple things, with noticing, with listening, with offering respect, acknowledging that the world is not just a resource to be used, but a living presence to be in a relationship with. To be in relationship with. Now, I've spent years working in the environmental sector. I've seen firsthand both the beauty of nature and the challenges that we face in protecting it. But I have also seen how powerful it is when people begin to notice again, when they step outside and see the land not just as background scenery, but as something alive. For me, animism isn't about me trying to push a dogma or a doctrine onto you. It's about me encouraging you and about me learning myself to be in conversation with the world again. I'm not trying to pretend that I am somehow above all of this. I too am a child of the modern world. It took me quite a while to find my way back to nature. And it's hard, but once you establish these relationships, once you learn that it's all about reciprocity and it's about presence, life becomes much brighter in a way. Because the spirits are still here, the land still listens, and if we take the time to listen back, we might just remember what it means to belong somewhere. The world is watching, and all we have to do is listen. If this video resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. How do you connect with nature in your own life? Do you have a place that feels sacred to you, a ritual, however small, that keeps you in touch with the land? Please drop a comment below and let's start a conversation. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more discussions on animism, heathenry, and the way that we can start to bring these ancient practices into the modern world. And if you'd like to support the channel, please check out my Ko-Fi and maybe take a look at our Discord server too. It does help me create more in-depth content like this. The land remembers. Let's remember too.